An interesting time to be talking about baseball here because the Sam Darnold trade just going through now. So I'm a little distracted as a person who grew up as a Jets fan. But hey, we're here to talk MLB DFS and get you set for Monday's main MLB DFS slate. And I don't know, we can talk football too. Don't really care too much. Either way, get those questions in. Let's get set for some fun sports discussion on a Monday. Welcome on into the FanDuel Fantasy Live Q&A. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, here to answer your questions live on air to get set for Monday's slate of MLB DFS. We are taking your questions right now from YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. No matter where you are watching, you can get those questions in. We can talk about pitchers. We can talk about one-offs. We can talk about stacks, general process for MLB DFS, whatever is on your mind for this Monday main slate. Happy to discuss and get you set for this slate. It's a pretty interesting one for sure because we have Jacob deGrom here as the highest salaried pitcher on FanDuel.com, $11,000 for his salary. The second highest salaried pitcher for today's slate, Justice Sheffield, all the way down at $7,200. So a massive gap between deGrom and the field, which means that if you use Jacob deGrom, you're going to have the same type of roster construction as everyone else. If you use anyone else, you'll have a very different roster construction. So it's a very unique slate where you're kind of in one zone or another. You're either scrounging for salaried hitter or using whatever hitter you want. So an interesting discussion for today. I think that for me, when I'm looking at this slate, I definitely do want to focus on deGrom first and foremost. Let's pull up the data here to look at why he is the highest salaried pitcher. I know you don't really need justification for using Jacob deGrom, but I do think that it's worth looking at it, the reasons that he's there. If we look at deGrom, this was over his final 7 starts last year, where he really leaned on that aggressively fast four-seam fastball, a 2.45 skill interactive ERA, 43% strikeout rate. He did allow a bit of hard contact, which is kind of a natural side effect of throwing, 163 miles per hour. But I still think that it's noteworthy that the barrel rate was up for him. Facing the Phillies, not a terrible offense by any means, but not one we need to avoid. 109 WRC plus against righties. This is for their current active roster since the start of 2020. So it includes last year's data and what the little we have from this year. 22% strikeout rate. So again, not like an elite matchup, but not the worst one by any means. So I think that deGrom, for me personally, I want to be overweight on him relative to the field in tournaments. Like if I assume that the field will have him on 40 to 50% of lineups, which I think is pretty fair, maybe a little bit higher, I want to go 75%, use the other 25% to use lower salary pitchers we do like, and we'll talk about throughout the show for today. So Jacob deGrom, yes, it will definitely cost you a lot from a salary perspective, but still worth it for me. Let's start things off here with a question over on Facebook from Brad. Who is your sleeper hitter for tonight? A low buy. So it's always kind of hard to judge popularity just because, with MLB, things can go a lot of different ways. But I think that a good way to judge popularity is you can go to numberFire.com and you can pull up the heat map here, which is one of my favorite tools. Let's do this. Pull up the heat map for the main slate. Hopefully I'm logged in. I am. Good. Okay. Sometimes I'm not. So if you're trying to judge who will be popular for hitters, just sort by implied total. And we see here that the Angels have a super high implied total. One team that does not have a very high implied total is the Padres. So I would assume that means the Padres wind up being less popular than they potentially should be, which leads me to a player I think will be a bit undervalued in Jake Cronenworth. I like Cronenworth a lot because really good plate discipline data, which is good because it means he'll put the ball in play a lot. We want that for our hitters, just more chances at higher upside, events. But also he can swipe some bags. He had 12 steals in AAA back in 2019, had 3 last year in the abbreviated season, had actually a good barrel rate. Last year, 10.5% barrel rate for him. League average is around 7.5%, so that's a good number for Jake Cronenworth. No barrels yet so far this year, but not a ton of strikeouts. If you're trying to find data you can actually put value in early in the season, strikeouts are big. If a guy is striking out a lot, that probably means he's not seeing the ball all that well. With Cronenworth, as always been the case for him, not a lot of strikeouts. Looks like it's just 1 in 18 plate appearances for him. So seeing the ball well to start the year, a guy who had good data last year, $2,900, likely to bat near the top of the order for the Padres. that lines up really well for me. And again, not a super high implied total for this Padres team, which to me says they're probably not going to be the most popular stacking candidate for today. They're facing Anthony DeSclafani. DeSclafani, interesting guy, someone who's had good numbers in the past, but in the season last year, just really got knocked around. We've seen the Giants kind of rebuild pitchers. Kevin Gausman was unusable previously, but now last year he became like a really good pitcher and suddenly became a guy who earned another contract with the Giants. So we've seen the Giants work well with guys in a similar mold to DeSclafani in the past, but for right now, I am willing to stack against him. So to me, that says that I think we should have Jake Cronenworth as being a really valuable hitter for tonight. So, Brad, you're looking for a less popular hitter who I think is a really good play. Cronenworth would probably be that option for me. Let's go over here to YouTube. Take a question from Logan. He has Josh Bell in his fantasy league. Should I trade/drop him? It's been tough with the national stuff because of the delays due to COVID. I would assume that's kind of the one thing that's been standing out here with Josh Bell. It's been annoying. I have Bell in a dynasty league. I also had some Mets guys who got banged because of the COVID stuff last week. That was pretty annoying, but I wouldn't cut bait. I haven't seen any reports that Josh Bell was one of the guys tested positive. So I've been kind of offline for the past hour or 2 hours because we're recording our Masters podcast. So if news has come out that Josh Bell is going to miss time as a result of that, then you probably could, because he's kind of like a fringy type guy to begin with. Season long, definitely not my forte by any means, but I would be inclined to hold because they're going to play games eventually. It sounds like they're planning a double header for Wednesday. So I would hold Josh Bell for now, kind of see what happens, because they're eventually going to have to play baseball. So I would hold on, see what happens. But if we get more grim word around him, then you could change from there. But for right now, I'd hold because he's fine. Probably not going to find a lot of stuff a whole lot better. I'm not a huge Josh Bell guy, but still someone I'd be willing to hold on to and kind of see what happens there. Once again, no matter where you're watching this stream, you can get those questions in Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We'll take questions from all arenas to get you set for tonight's slate. I mean, we can talk season long too. I'm not good at season long necessarily. I do have my second place trophy over here to my left because, if you're going to brag about season long, might as well be second place as opposed to first. We can talk some about that if you want, but mainly here to talk about DFS and get you set for that. Okay, so Jacob deGrom, number one pitcher for tonight, someone I want in 75%, which means I've still got a quarter of my lineups from using someone else at pitcher. Where do we go in that other quarter? To me, that guy is Dustin May. Dustin May isn't really someone who pops for DFS because if you look at his full season data, let's look at last year for Dustin May, we're going to see a low strikeout rate. It's not a great number for him. I think it's probably around 20% for the full season last year, maybe even a little bit lower than that. 20% for Dustin May last year. We're normally not going to get behind a lot of guys in DFS with a 20% strikeout rate because strikeouts do a lot to move the needle. You need those points in some way. But May is interesting because there's been a lot of buzz this spring about Dustin May throwing his curveball, and it's looked pretty good. The numbers for Dustin May this spring go here to Baseball Reference. I believe they still have those up. Yeah, they do. Okay, so in spring training, 17 strikeouts compared to 6 walks in 13 in 2/3 innings. Really good numbers for Dustin May, and I do put stock in strikeout numbers from spring training. We can go back to last year, and that curveball is not a new pitch for Dustin May. He actually was throwing it towards the end of last year as well. And I think it's a 5-start sample. It is 6 appearances towards the end of last year. I think actually 2 were in relief, but they were longer relief, so I'll put them in here. In those 6 appearances, his strikeout rate was up to 23%, which put his skill interactive ERA down to 3.94. Facing a decent offense of the A's, but they've lost a couple of pieces, a 25% strikeout rate for them against righties since the start of last year. I think that adds up pretty well. So to me, I think it's kind of a 2-pitcher kind of night. Jacob deGrom, number 1, Dustin May, number 2. I could very well see myself having nobody else in my lineups, and I think that's the way I'll wind up for tonight. So deGrom and May, the clear 2 standouts. We can talk about other pitchers if you have questions about those guys, but to me, the slate really does revolve around those 2. Let's go to Facebook here and take a question from Brad. Rank your stacks for tonight. Okay, so let's go over here to the hitter tab. Oh, stupid. There we go. Okay, the hitter tab for today. I think the Padres deserve to be number one on our list. Again, DeSclafani could be good with the Giants, but I kind of want to see it before I overreact to that. The temperature not great in San Diego for tonight, 59 degrees. That is lower than we have in most of the East Coast spots and in Los Angeles. So that's a bit annoying, but it's also not prohibitively low, whereas it is pretty low in Oakland and pretty low in Boston as well. So not as low as there, which I think is at least encouraging in itself. So that's good. I think that bodes well for the Padres. DeSclafani would need to make massive, massive strides to be unstackable against, if that's a phrase we can use, with this Padres offense as good as this one. So I think the Padres are the number one stack for me for tonight, Brad, which does tie into the Cronenworth discussion that we had before. Number two for me, I will go with the Mets. They're facing Matt Moore. The Mets actually have a lot of good lefties. So stacking them against a lefty may not be the wisest thing, but as you can see here, and this is based on their active roster from last year, what they did, and this year too, 117 WRC plus, actually no data this year for the Mets because of COVID stuff, but 117 WRC plus against lefties alone. Not the best batted ball data, but they don't strike out all that much. And the interesting thing about the Mets, we pull up their numbers here against lefties, they actually have a decent number of lefties who are good against lefties. I know that early in his career, we saw Michael Conforto get benched a lot against lefties. Didn't have the best numbers, but he's gotten better as the years have gone along versus left-handed pitchers, to the point where I think it's actually kind of okay to use Conforto against lefty. Obviously, these are very small samples with the Mets, but against lefties last year, disregard the WRC plus. There is not enough data to believe into that. But Conforto at 23% strikeout rate, I will buy into that over an 86 plate appearance sample. Decent walk rate means he was seeing the ball well. 203 ISO. So he's hitting for some power, not striking out at a prohibitively high rate. I think that bodes well for Conforto being a guy who can actually hang against lefties. So I would say, yeah, it's a lefty-on-lefty matchup, but I do think that Conforto is someone you can use facing lefty. He's batting third for today. We see Pilar batting leadoff. Ooh, that's fun. We can go back to Brad. You want an under-the-radar hitter? Kevin Pilar is actually probably that guy. Numbers against lefties last year, 41% hard hit rate, 35% fly ball rate, 18% strikeout rate. Those are stud-type numbers. Pilar long-term is not a stud, but he's been okay against lefties for his entire career. So you have Kevin Pilar at $2,500. That's pretty good. I'm going to refresh here just so we can get the updated, yes, I'd like to reload, just so I can get the updated lineup stuff in there for the Mets. Not the lineup is in there. We'll wait until that refreshes. But other stuff in the Mets lineup, we have Pilar leadoff, Lindor second, Conforto third, Alonso, Just Dongs Davis. That's what the JD stands for. We got him in there. Okay, so let's pull this up here. We got Pilar leadoff. Let's go with DeGrom as pitcher so we can figure out how much salary we have to save here. And then let's go look at just the Mets here. And I'm going to put Davis in there too because I know I'll want him in there. So if I go with Davis and Pilar, I've got 3183 left. That's actually pretty good. My other stack for today is the Padres, so I can probably go with Alonso. I can go with Lindor here. The problem is, do I want to go with Lindor at $3,700 or do I want to go Tatis? I think I'd probably lean towards Lindor because I feel better about his matchup against Matt Moore. Let's check out the numbers for Lindor against lefties last year. 36% hard hit rate, 38% fly ball rate, almost no strikeouts. That's fun. Didn't hit for a lot of power. Maybe I will go Tatis over Lindor. Let's see what the salary discrepancy is here for those guys. Tatis is $4,200. That's not high enough. So we're going to go with Tatis there, which means that I'm probably going to go with Alonso and Conforto as the other guys in this Mets stack. I will need a one-off here because I have DeGrom as my pitcher, but I think, that allows you to use guys who are good against lefties for this Mets stack. Even, again, Conforto, lefty on lefty, but he's still very good. I can use Conforto there. I can get to Tatis for my Padres stack. I'm not going to give out the full lineup. That's weird. We're going to go with Cronenworth here. That's not too bad. I can work with $2,600 left for my final two slots. Maybe we get Jurickson Profar in there. Maybe Victor Caratini winds up grading out pretty well. Either way, I think the big takeaway from this is that the Mets can give us some value, give us good hitters. James McCann, honestly, is a guy who can just obliterate lefties. The sample on him will actually be pretty small, but 36 plate appearances, 46% hard hit rate from against lefties. We can pull up the career numbers from McCann as well, because he's always been someone, back to the Detroit days, who you would use pretty much whenever they're facing lefty. I think, if I recall correctly, they may have used him as a DH at times when they were facing left-handed pitching, just because he was so good against lefties. If you go to FanGraphs, you can pull up handedness splits that'll show you year-by-year numbers for that batter against handedness. So we can see here that for the full career for James McCann, 38% hard hit rates, and even good numbers when he left Detroit. Detroit kind of has a hot gun with regards to stuff like hard hit rates, so a little bit overinflated, but a 37% fly ball rate, the isolated slugging, 216. Really good numbers for McCann. So let's say you're not feeling Alonso for some reason. Personally, I probably will be. I guess he didn't have great numbers against lefties last year, but honestly, he's a good hitter. But let's say you want to get to guys like Machado. So you can go to James McCann and give yourself a lot of flexibility there. So we talked about Cronenworth as being an under-the-radar hitter for Brad. Talked about Kevin Pillar. I also think that James McCann fits in that same position as Alonso, which means that he'll probably be a little bit more contrarian there. And he also does save you a lot of salary. So to me, I think that you've got a lot of options with the Mets. So that's why the Mets will be my number 2 stack for tonight. Probably not sticking to just 2 stacks, though. Realistically, if we're sticking to 2 pitches, we probably do want to find ways to differentiate elsewhere. So we're going DeGrom and May at pitcher. We got the Padres and the Mets as far as stacks. I think the third-ranked stack is kind of a glob. There are like 3 teams that I think are in play for that third stack. I think that one of them would be the Astros facing Jose Quintana. Looked pretty good during the spring. I think it was 22 strikeouts for Quintana across 19 and 2/3 innings. Again, I do value strikeouts during the spring. Quintana got a decent amount. The Astros have taken steps back against lefties since the start of last year. So I think that the Astros interesting for sure, but not like a massive priority. I also think the Brewers are interesting here against Trevor Williams. Pretty rough numbers for him last year, especially the results. Williams has always used to be a guy who was really good at limiting hard contact. Wasn't quite the case last year, and the results against him, rough. So I would say you can use the Brewers. The Brewers are a team, the red here is just, it'll gorge your eyeballs out. But the biggest red is in the strikeout rate. And Williams is not a guy who gets a lot of strikeouts. So I think you can better tolerate using the Brewers as a stacking candidate when you're using them against a lower strikeout pitcher than a guy who gets a lot of strikeouts. So to me, I think they're more in play tonight. If I had to pick, I should probably go with the Astros over the Brewers as my third stack. The reason that I hesitate there is that the Brewers actually do provide a lot of value, and the Astros obviously do not. So I think that I'd be looking at that and considering the Brewers as a stack, but I'd probably go the Astros over them. If you need value, go with the Brewers. If you don't need value, go Astros. Mateo, how do you like the Brewers, Tampa, and Angels bats for tonight? So good question, Mateo. I had not talked about the Rays yet, so let's go to them. They're facing Nick Pivetta, and kind of like Nick Pivetta, I talked about him on the solo shot today. He was my third-ranked pitcher. I might wind up waffling on that and going with Carlos Rodon over Pivetta. The key thing for Pivetta, a lot of pitches. He went 96 pitches during the spring, back on March 26th. So Pivetta's got a full leash, and I think that's encouraging, given a lot of guys don't. He made 2 starts at the end of last year for this Red Sox team. So the data we have here, Pivetta, very small sample, very fluky, don't trust it. However, he was pretty good, 31% strikeout rate. His swinging strike rate was closer to 11%, if I recall correctly. So if I'm projecting a strikeout rate for Pivetta this year for the Red Sox, probably around 23% or so. That's not bad, especially when he's facing a high strikeout team like Tampa Bay. 26% strikeout rate for them since the start of last year against righties. So that's good for Pivetta. Also good for Pivetta is the weather. 50-degree temperatures in Boston for tonight. So if I had to choose between stacking the Rays versus using Pivetta as a pitcher, I actually might lean towards using Pivetta as a pitcher. I think that's pretty viable. I have Dustin May ranked well above Pivetta if you're trying to deviate from Jacob deGrom. But I do think that he would be number 3 for me. I don't know. It's between him and Rodon. So one of those two for me. But I do think that Pivetta is kind of interesting. But like the reason Mateo is asking is because Pivetta long-term has not been that good. So you can definitely stack the Rays. They can hit the ball hard. I will not talk you out of them. I'm just saying for me personally, I'd rather use Pivetta as a pitcher than stack against him. Talked about the Brewers, probably right as Mateo was asking that question. I do like the Brewers. I think they're interesting for tonight against Trevor Williams. Angels are facing Luis Garcia. So we're going to pull up Luis Garcia's numbers here, and it's tough because there were two guys named Luis Garcia who debuted last year, one of whom was the hitter for the Nationals, other guy the pitcher for the Astros. The pitcher for the Astros, the second one down over on FanGraphs. I actually believe the talent quite a bit here, and I think he's a good pitcher. As you can see, last year, very small sample, 12 and a third innings. The thing that pushes me away from stacking against Garcia from an Angels perspective is that he doesn't project to allow a lot of balls in play. Look at this. These numbers here from 2019 for Garcia. These are in the low minors, so keep that in mind. But 36% strikeout rate, and then 39% high A. A lot of walks, too. Walks mean batters on base. That's a good thing for the opposing team, but it also means fewer balls in play. I want to maximize balls in play with my stacks. I'm probably not going to get that against a guy like Garcia. And I don't recall the spring numbers here for Garcia. I probably had it in here. He went only 6 2/3 innings and 2 public starts in the spring. I'm not sure what the pitch count will be for Garcia because I can't really use him as a pitcher, but I also don't necessarily want to stack against him because I don't think he'll allow a lot of balls in play. So between those three ones, I definitely go the Brewers as my favorite stack for tonight. Between those three, I think the Rays are okay. I'm not going to use them myself, again, in the interest of full transparency, because I do think the Pivetta is kind of interesting from a pitch count perspective and from a pitcher perspective. But I think that the Angels, I don't know. I mean, like Garcia might have some serious issues, and that could be good. And I always talk about wanting exposure to middle relief pitching. We could get that if Garcia does walk a lot of guys. So the Angels are an option, just not one I want to use. Don't really fit my process where I want to maximize balls in play. They don't quite get me that. So if I'm ranking stacks for tonight, we're going Padres 1, Mets 2, Brewers probably 3, I think, despite the fact that they're not very good. I just think that the matchup with Williams is good enough to get me there. And it's pretty warm at Wrigley for today, 68 degrees. Perfect day to watch some baseball at Wrigley. I can definitely get behind that. So 68-degree temperatures, that's good for hitters too. And then I'd go with the Astros as being the next ones up for me. So pretty wishy-washy day overall. I do want to talk about Carlos Rodon here quickly because we have not discussed him super in depth yet. The numbers you see on Rodon, I think, are from the 7 starts he made in 2019. It's only 7 starts because he had Tommy John, missed all of 2020. Actually, he did play at the end of 2020. So we don't have a lot of data recently on Rodon, I think is the overall takeaway here. But in the starts he did make back in 2019, 29% strikeout rate. He allowed a barrel rate of 5.3%. That's not too bad. And Rodon looked really good during the spring. 16 strikeouts to 1 walk over 13 2/3 innings. And for a guy who was as good as he was coming up, he was a super hyped prospect. You give me those numbers in the spring combined with what he did before he was hurt in 2019. That's not too bad. 79 pitches in his final spring tune-up. He actually had a simulated game on Wednesday. It's not his final one, but his final official one. 79 pitches there, probably close to fully-ish stretched out. I'm probably projecting 85 pitches or so for Rodon tonight. That's not bad. So I would say he is at least on par with Pivetta. You could convince me to put Rodon above. I think the pitch count thing does allow me to favor Pivetta over Rodon, but, it's not bad. So I think it's a night where I do want to focus mainly on DeGrom in May. However, if I were to go elsewhere, it would be with Rodon and Pivetta, and I do think that there's enough there where you can justify using them. So a lot of ways you can play tonight, but to me, it's a build around DeGrom, 75% of lineups or so. I'd probably go May, the other 25%, to allow myself to get more exposure to Lindor, Alonso, Tatis, Machado, guys like that. And that's probably where I'm going for tonight. But if you do want to deviate a pitcher and maybe not go to DeGrom, I think that between May, Rodon, Pivetta, you have options where you can allow yourself to do so. That is all the time that we have for today here on the Q&A. But tomorrow, pretty special day because we actually have a back-to-back of the Q&A. We're on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook and Twitter channels. We are going with the Masters Q&A for my colleague Brandon Gadula. That'll be at 3:30, talking about his favorite DFS plays and his favorite bets for the Masters. That is at 3:30. Immediately after that, we'll transition into MLB DFS, get you set for the main slate tomorrow night. The main slate looking pretty good. Let's pull up over here, see what we got over here for pitchers for tomorrow night. Yu Darvish, Lucas Giolito, Tyler Glasnow. Sweet. Sign me up. Tomorrow will be fun. So make sure you tune in 3:30 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow to get set for the Masters, and followed by MLB DFS. If you want more Masters coverage, we did record our Masters podcast. Audio version is up now. We also have the video version over on the FanDuel YouTube page if you want to watch over there. If you have additional questions for me, I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck with your MLB DFS lineups for tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, to get you set with the solo shot for Tuesday's slate. This has been the FanDuel Fantasy Live Q&A.